This SoonerScoop.com video is streaming in crystal clear 4K resolution on YouTube thanks to Enjoy Vision in Oklahoma City. If you're ready to see the rest of the world just as clearly, get your fresh perspective at Enjoy Vision. Enjoy Vision. This is where Sooner Scoop LASIX.
Hello and welcome back. Eddie Radosovich, George Stoya here from the SoonerScoop.com studios. Welcome back to the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel. We will be getting into a recruiting report where we bring in Josh McCuistion, who is down at Houston HQ. He went over to the Houston Under Armour camp. Plenty of Oklahoma targets, offers, things of that such that we can get into. Wrapping up a Crimson Combine weekend. It was monumental. It was historic. Did it change your life?
No, but did Rory winning on Sunday change your life?
Man, that was awesome.
It was
maybe one of the best Masters Sundays of, dare I say, all time outside of the Tiger category. But the twists and turns and everything in between, that was
awesome.
It was awesome.
It was emotional.
It was. I'm glad Carrie didn't come in the other room while we were in there because I was crying. We were both crying in our own separate rooms. Unbelievable Masters Sunday, though. Congratulations to Rory finishing out the Grand Slam. You know what else is a Grand Slam? Kind of a segue there. Our good friends over at William & Lauren. William & Lauren, they've been with us all year, and they're the official custom clothier of Oklahoma football. William & Lauren outfits your favorite OU players in custom suits that boost their confidence off the field to match their confidence on the field. Perfectly tailored clothing ensures every Sooner stands out in comfort and style at prices that make luxury accessible. They're outfitting George Stoya there for his wedding coming up this summer. Visit William & Lauren in Oklahoma City, as George did, or online at williamandlauren.com. That is williamandlauren.com. They got the brick and mortar open in the 918 as well. Care helping out George there. Dress like a champion and make your style as legendary as Oklahoma football.
It was awesome. I'm super excited. I think we're a few weeks away maybe from getting that suit done, and I'll go try it on, make sure I didn't gain any weight.
Well, you're going to have to put down the jelly beans in the office conference room if we're going to do that.
That's Carrie's fault.
Well, it's kind of your fault. You can have a little bit of self-restraint and not eat them, like myself. Josh McCuistion, a little sunburn these days. You know it's camp season when we get Josh McCuistion here, and he is a bright red glow there. Welcome in. How are we?
Guys, I'm good. Got the shirt to tone down. If there's a little orange, a little yellow, it makes my red look like it's part of the plan. So I'm kind of excited about that. But good day at Houston Under Armour. Guys, great sports weekend. Caught the Astros on Friday night. Laney had like a on-field cheer function that happened during the game, and then got to watch a first ever Grand Slam I'd ever seen in person. So that was kind of great. And then obviously agree with you guys watching Rory on Sunday. That was pretty cool, and even brought a Tiffany McCuistion to tears alongside you all. She does not know who Rory is, does not care, but she was definitely swept up in that moment.
Was that the Cam Smith Grand Slam on Friday night?
That was Yainer Diaz, actually. So, and I got to see. It was my first time to watch Mike Trout, longtime favorite player. He hit a bomb in the third or fourth.
It's pretty sick.
Nice all around night. Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, everybody can't lead the Major League Baseball and run differential right now, so it is what it is. Cubs might be the best team. They just took 2 or 3 from the Dodgers at Dodger Stadium. So
Dodgers kind of stink.
Well, or they just got run over by a superpower.
Yeah,
sucks for Justin Steele. You had Justin Steele on a keeper league, don't you, Josh?
No.
Okay.
Justin Steele's not part of my plans. Absolutely.
Damn. All right. Well, that sucks for the Cubs, but we move on. Let's get into some recruiting stuff. Obviously, Under Armour camp. It's camp season. Spring football for the college side is wrapped. We're going to be getting to spring football for a bunch of the high schools, obviously, down in the Texas area, as well as here in the state of Oklahoma here over the next month or so. But let's jump into it. The Under Armour camp, just as a whole, how was the group? It seemed like a pretty good group.
It was very kind of feast or famine. Like the guys that were there that, we were watching, really big time guys. You had multiple invites go out to the Under Armour game, some future 50 invites, including a couple of guys OU's involved with. So it was really, really good at the top. The depth of the camp wasn't as good as like what we saw in Dallas a couple of months ago. So It was a little bit different, but I got my first chance to see a couple of guys that, obviously we'll talk about that I would say more than lived up to what I'd hoped to see. There was definitely guys that you can see why OU has made them a focus early on.
Let's start. No place better to start than one of our favorites, 6'3", 370 out of Euless, Texas, Trinity High School. Our good friend Toa Catoa. He's still, my friends out there, he is still enormous.
Yeah, Toa. It's one of those great things. Like some guys, we talk about this all the time. Like you want to know who it is as soon as he gets off the bus. Like no doubt. Toa the second you see him, from the tattoos, his belly's always hanging. I respect it as a big guy myself. He just doesn't care. Like I just love that about him. And again, he was really good. Didn't actually make the final five, which we'll talk about one of the guys that did, or a couple of guys that did, on the O-line, D-line one-on-ones. And it kind of surprised me and several others. I don't really know what the parameter was that he missed, because I thought he was pretty dominant. He's and what I like about that with Toa is this is a pass blocking situation. I mean, that's what you're doing. Anybody who's watched Trinity or followed Trinity in the last 20 years knows that's a team that wants to hit you in the mouth. They're going to run at you. So he hasn't done a lot of pass pro stuff. This isn't like his home base or anything. So I like it that he keeps going to these camps and doing a lot to just kind of get a little bit better in something that, I think right now is a learning thing for him.
Josh, did you get a chance to catch up with him, and where's he at in his recruitment? I think the last we heard about him was he had a Final 3.
Yeah, did have a chance to talk with Toa for a while. He talked about SMU. He talked about Oklahoma and his third finalist, Texas A&M as well. I think everybody now is kind of watching the situation with SMU. When they got included, I think maybe people weren't sure of why. They've hired his uncle, Jake Lange, who's worked in the Texas front office for a while, kind of before we use the term front office, and now has been hired by SMU. What is interesting is someone kind of asked him about what role that would play in his recruitment. And I may be reading too much into it, but it felt overly like, it was like, oh no, that won't have anything to do with it. I really like Guerin. I think his last name's Justice, the SMU offensive line coach. And he was like, I've liked him all along. Like there's nothing, there's never been a problem or any need for things to change at SMU. It felt like you're trying to tell everybody that, oh no, that's no big deal, when obviously it is. This is a guy that is, a family member, a guy that has been a part of advising Toa for years and how to handle their recruitment. And he, from everything you can gather, this isn't like a handler. This is someone who cares about the kid, someone who knows him well. And to me, it was like, oh, okay, this SMU thing's even bigger than I thought it was. So I think it's going to be a tough battle for Oklahoma. Now, he still loves Bill Bedenbaugh. He talked about how much Bill and Brent and kind of the family, the way that Oklahoma presents itself and the things that they value means a lot to his father. He mentioned his aunties and his uncles. Like he really kind of got into the whole family dynamic. But it clearly is a big deal for him. It's just like, okay, this is a presentation of family, and that's actual family. So I think that's a little bit of a tricky thing that Oklahoma is really going to have to fight.
It's a little refreshing to see family members not looking out for themselves rather than maybe looking out for the kid. It's uncommon in today's.
Yeah, I don't see anybody going at our guy Pete Nakos from this situation. So that's nice to see.
Okay, that's a win for Pete Nakos and maybe a win for humanity overall. We'll get to the Nico stuff here at the end. Let's go 2027 defensive line, a name that was relatively new to me. Was he new to you in 2027? Cedar Hill defensive tackle Jaylen Brewster, 6'4", 277, and certainly looks the part, Josh.
I want you all to watch this tape and realize this is a kid that as a freshman played Wildcat quarterback for Cedar Hill.
Oh my God.
Imagine tackling that monster. And he's a guy Oklahoma offered him, I want to say very early in his sophomore season. So they were in very early. They knew they liked him. And you watch this kid and it is not hard to see why. I mean, his burst is easy. He's really active. And again, listed at like, I think you said 6'4", 275. He looks bigger than that when you look at him. I mean, he's I bet he's 285, 290. He is a big kid, but he moves around like that Wildcat quarterback. You can see it. Like his feet are quick. He's really, like I said, very active. This is the only rep all day he lost, and that one going head up there on the kid. And I want to say that guy, I believe he didn't take O-line MVP, but he was one of the final five. Like, I mean, this was a good player he was going head up against. That was the final five we're actually watching. He won 2 of those 3. So again, I couldn't have been more impressed. I mentioned earlier a young guy that I was kind of hoping to see something good from. And I really thought it would be, okay, he's kind of rough, but boy, you see something every once in a while. He's much farther along than I expected him to be. Now, he's still incredibly raw, but there are tools there that are impossible to miss.
I mean, Josh is already looking at his On3 industry ranking, top 5 defensive lineman in the 2027 class. I mean, is this kid going to end up being, I don't know, a David Stone type of player where he's getting recruited by just about every big school?
Yeah, I think that's probably what this is going to look like. He's probably going to end up a top 20, top 30 type of player. I mean, again, all the time I see guys like, oh, they got a lot of hype, and you watch them on tape, and you're like, oh, he's very athletic. And then you see them in person, and they're 6'1", and they're 260, and you're like, okay, that's great, but there's a ceiling for that. He's 6'4", 6'3 and a half, 6'4", 290 pounds, and he moves like he does. Like there's no ceiling to what schools will recruit a guy like that. So I think he's going to have every opportunity he could want.
Was he part of the group that came up here on Saturday? Did he make it up here?
He actually did, and I think that is a really good indicator for Oklahoma.
Sure.
I want to say it was his 4th trip to Oklahoma, something like that, 3rd or 4th for sure. And obviously went up to Norman and then was back in Houston by, noon on Sunday. So, for a Dallas area guy, it's not like he was just going back home. He passed home and then went on back down south. So I think, and to be fair, he mentioned kind of a leaderboard. Oklahoma is definitely in that group. I'm going to have a story on him a little later, so we're going to tease it just a little bit. But go check out the site. It'll be up later today, where he kind of talked about 3 schools that are really standing out. But I can say Oklahoma is one of those schools, and they're going to have to do some work, because, like I was just talking about with George, there is going to be no shortage of suitors for Jaylen Brewster.
Another player in the offensive line, defensive line that didn't have to travel very far, Kingwood High School in the Houston area, and we were talking about him before we started, but Kennedy Brown, 6'5", 285 offensive tackle, and I take it you walked away thoroughly impressed.
Yeah, this was, I've seen him on tape, and I knew I liked Kennedy Brown a lot. He's actually a guy I've talked to for quite some time, because I was just going through some tape, and I happened to stumble on his, and you kind of couldn't stop watching it. Me being the O-line guy I am, we just started talking. And Kennedy is, again, like, you see a lot of these guys that are like, okay, they're really good athletes and they move really well, but he's got some nasty to him. Like, he likes mixing it up. He wanted to kind of just overwhelm guys. And the player he's going against, this guy spent the last couple of years playing in the Trinity League in California at St. John Bosco. So this is a guy that's very familiar with good football players. And again, a little bit of a physical mismatch, but Kennedy Brown just dominates here. And like, you just see how well he moves his feet. He's not doing some of the hopping, you sometimes see from young linemen when they're trying to base, little quick slide steps. Like there was very little to take issue with yesterday. And again, if he's not I don't want to get too crazy, but if he's not a top 15 player in 2027, it is truly one of the better classes we're going to have seen in a long time. He's a special player.
That's what I was just about to ask, Josh. I mean, we talked about Brewster and being a top player in the country. It sounds like Brown's going to be a top guy. I mean, I would assume all the Texas schools are in on Brown, and obviously you add Oklahoma into that mix.
Yeah, there is the interesting part here, guys. OU has not offered Kennedy Brown as of this point in time. This is, and I said it when Eddie, you mentioned we were talking before the show. There's a lot of Kelvin Banks here. And I mean that both as a player and both as kind of OU never got serious about Kelvin Banks for a very long time, and you couldn't figure out why. Now, I don't think OU's to the point of, it's just over and there's never going to be a chance, but they need to get moving with that. My understanding, I put it up on the board yesterday, is he's a guy that Oklahoma wants to come to camp. Now, I think some of that, people say, oh, why would he need to come to camp? And while I don't think that's probably the way they should play this because of the offer list he already has, I think it's a deal where Oklahoma wants to, are you really interested in us? Do you really want, is this something we should pursue? Or are you going to go to Texas or A&M or LSU or any of the other hundreds of other schools that he's going to have a choice to pick from? So I think it's more of a litmus test, just kind of like, how do you feel about OU? We'll see. I don't think I don't think that'll pay dividend for him. I don't think that's going to be the way you want to play that, but it's a really good offensive line class in 27. Kind of, I don't know if it's going to be similar to 2025, but there's a lot of good talent out there. So, I'm sorry. According to 2024, I apologize.
Sure.
No, 25. I had it
you're
right
right.
the first time.
You're right.
I'm going to stop talking. Yeah. So anyway, but yeah, my impression of the schools he's going to be serious about, I think Texas is absolutely going to be there. I think Texas A&M will be there. He feels like a guy that might stay a little closer to home. That's just kind of a very early impression. Now, he may end up signing with Oregon. I don't think anybody should be shocked by anything, but just kind of has that feel of maybe the local schools and regional schools. And I had somebody say, he'd be very interested in Oklahoma if they really get engaged here. But at some point, that rubber's kind of got to meet the road.
Somebody that you did write about on Monday morning, and that story's already up on SoonerScoop.com, is Jordan Clay, the wide receiver out of San Antonio, James Madison, On3 Industry, top 100 prospect. And turn on the tape, there's obviously a lot to like. Physically, he looks a little bit more developed than some of these other guys, Josh.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is a kid that's, I've seen him listed as much as 6'4". I don't know if I'd go that far, but he's 6'2", 6'3", and 190 pounds, super solidly built. Kind of that that guy that almost looks like a running back playing wide receiver because he's big in the lower body. He's very powerful, but you can see there, catches it really well away from his body. He's got no problems. And guys, I've seen him. I saw him at the Navy All-American game in San Antonio. He was one of the juniors that played. And then obviously seeing him here, guys, all he does is dominate. And I know he's been doing some 7-on-7 stuff. We're On3 awarded him the OT7 player of the week, I believe, just not this weekend, obviously, but the weekend before. So I think he has just had himself a really good spring. And this is him going against Chase Calicut, the big safety from Galena Park North Shore, that is a guy that Oklahoma is also involved with. So there is there's a lot of track record to say that he's just a very outstanding player. And again, a guy that's good. Sorry, I am stumbling all over myself right now. He is expected to be at Oklahoma's barbecue on June 20th. And then I think from there, and even at that point, I think we'll kind of know. Oklahoma's got a lot of receivers in play. We've talked a lot about that. I think maybe by that point in time, we'll kind of know where Jordan Clay kind of falls in the equation.
Josh, you wrote about it this morning in your story on Jordan. It seems like you got a lot of time with him. He talked a lot about his relationship with Emmett Jones. How big is that? And obviously it sounds like that's paying off if he's coming in for the Champ U barbecue or whatever that is in June now.
Yeah, this is a guy that really, was offered on the Houston weekend, and it kind of flew under the radar. Not a lot of people talked about it. He didn't make any big – he's not a guy that tweets out every offer and does some of that stuff. So I thought it was pretty interesting to hear him talk about how meaningful that was to him, the way OU chose to play that. Because one of my questions was, Oklahoma seems like they came into this a little later. I know Baylor's been involved for a long time. Texas has been involved for a long time. And, and I said, is that an issue? And he was really clear that it wasn't, and it didn't feel like just a denial for denial's sake. He kind of had some reasoning behind it where he talked about, they didn't want to offer me until they could get me up there, and then they brought me down on the field, and Coach Venables offered me at midfield before the U of H game, and no other school did anything like that. And so, I think Oklahoma's a contender here. Baylor has been a real constant in this recruitment, and I know a lot of people kind of be surprised to hear that, but with the offense and the way they're playing right now, I think they hold a lot of appeal for him, and being close to home. Obviously Waco to San Antonio is very manageable as far as travel goes. So Those are, I think, he also has talked a lot about Texas A&M. Texas has come up a lot. I think they were a lot bigger factor in this recruitment maybe 6 months ago. I don't know right now kind of where he fits into their plans. So we'll have to watch that a little bit. But again, if they were to turn up the heat, I think they would be right there in the mix with anybody else. So this is, I think, going to be maybe like an old-fashioned Big 12 battle, kind of Big 12 South from the old days.
Interesting.
I like that.
Jake Spavital, he's a good recruiter, the offensive coordinator over there. But Josh, I did want to ask you, because you kind of hinted at it. We've talked a lot about receiver. How many receivers do you think they're going to take in this class? Because it feels like they've got quite a few guys that
and it
they
might depend on like what the numbers look like after we get through the spring portal, and then obviously go into next year and see how some of the younger guys, Zion Kearney, Zion Raggins, how they develop.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Josh, the size. I mean, Jordan Clay's 6'3", 190. I mean, they're definitely recruiting some bigger receivers.
Yeah, guys, it's like almost the days of the pure slot receiver are just like dying in Oklahoma. Deion Burks may be the last of an era or something, but I mean, they clearly, I mean, you look at some of the guys they're out, Daniel Odom already committed, big guy. Then you've got Jordan Clay, some of these other names that we've talked about. There is no doubt that there is a lot of size kind of still being brought into the program to add to guys like Carry On and Zion Kearney and some of these other, big body types that we've seen. I would say, George, I think 3 is the minimum. Like I just, last year, I think they got a little heavy. They decided, and it's hard to know how much of that was, by design, how much of that was, okay, we've got to find some guys in the portal, with going out instead of taking a couple of high school, or, would-be college freshmen, you take Giovanni Gibson, you take Isaiah Satania. That makes sense with what their needs were, with where that team was. You kind of understood where that was. So I think there is a little bit of maybe here after spring ball kind of sitting down and saying, okay, this is what we've got. This is what it looks like. This is who, at this point we can basically assume is going to be back for 2026. Because, guys, while I look at that team and I see a lot of, 2026 could be really good. We've talked about it. If 2025, if they can kind of bridge that gap, wide receiver is one of the few positions on the field where you're like, okay, there's going to be a lot that could be gone, could have to replace. But, if Elijah Thomas is the guy I think he is, then they at least have a great starting point.
Before we move on to quarterback and running back, 2 more safeties to just kind of discuss real quick. Eli Johnson, safety out of Sabalo Steel, Jonathan Hatton's teammate, as well as Chase Calicut, who you had mentioned there going against Jordan Clay. What's the feel there at safety for both of those guys?
Yeah, Chase is guys, I mean, you talk about what you draw up what a safety looks like. He is an enormous human being. This is him going head-to-head against Jordan Clay, right? Or no, this is a different clip. I'm sorry. But yeah, so earlier on, you could see him go against Jordan Clay, and the very first rep of camp is him going against Clay, and he gets underneath a route and just breaks up. It's almost an identical play to that, except he just reaches his big long arm out and breaks up the pass. Was one of the better DB plays I saw all day. Now, this is where he can get into trouble. When it's not just, let my athleticism take over. It's how does he respond to a route? How does he deal with the receiver hitting him with a double move? Can he feel that? Because you see him, like, he cheats, and then the second he looks inside, Jordan Clay breaks outside, and that, the rep's over. Like, it's already done. But, again, this is a guy out of the huge program there at North Shore, all the physical tools in the world, all you could look for. Runs really well. He can turn for a guy that's probably legitimately 6'3" and 195 pounds. So there is the tools are there. I think there are some questions about how well does he see it? Can he develop that part of his game? Because, like I said, the tools are overwhelming.
Eli Johnson.
Yeah, Eli, had a solid day, got lost in coverage a couple of times. A guy that I think is more of a, for Oklahoma fans, kind of a cheetah type of guy. Every bit of 6'2.5", 6'3", 190, runs very well, very physical when you watch his sophomore highlight tape. He's I should say Calicut's a 2026 guy. Eli Johnson, the 2027 guy.
yeah.
So he's got a little more time to continue to develop. Obviously comes from just another tremendously great program there at Steele. And is a guy that I had a chance to watch a couple of times last year, while watching Jonathan Hatton. So he's a guy, we talked about his a little bit yesterday. He's got a great relationship with Brandon Hall. They stay in frequent contact. I would expect him to probably get up for a game this fall, if everything is working in the right direction. And again, that camp is not the perfect showcase for safeties like these that are not cover guys like a Jaden Hardy or a Reggie Powers, those kind of guys. These guys are more like Michael Boganowski's. Like, you want them coming down in the box, they're going to fill run, and they're going to be extremely violent when they get there. So I think that's more of where their game is geared. But obviously, offenses are going to know that. They're going to gear things to getting those guys isolated. So you've got to get better in those things. But again, I think people might watch some of those clips and make too much of it, and they've still got plenty of time to get to where they need to be.
There's still a lot to be decided in the 2026 quarterback class, but it might not even be a name that Oklahoma ends up pursuing. But Brody Bartti, 2027 quarterback out of Missouri City, Texas, Ridge Point High School. He threw for 2,231 yards a year ago, 23 touchdowns. Looks pretty good on tape, Josh.
Yeah, I was talking on the sideline with a coach that went against him last year, and he was talking about all the talent that Ridge Point has. And he goes, but who I liked was the quarterback kid, the Bartti kid. And, I didn't know much about him. I won't claim that I did. But just watching him and his timing and how, under control he looks all throughout the camp. And, again, I won't even lie. This is my first chance kind of watching him throw the ball around a little bit for Ridge Point. But this is a guy that, he must be an Episcopal here. I don't think I knew that he was a transfer to Ridge Point. But, regardless, you can see the arm talent. You can see, again, because and in this tape, guys, we're talking about, you're watching a freshman right here. This has to be, as a freshman at an Episcopal school that has produced guys like, Walker Little, Marvin Wilson, there was Jalen Waddle. This is a good program, guys. So, I came away very impressed. And with 2027, I think we all know OU is focused pretty heavily on Peyton Houston. But I don't think anything's written in stone there, and he's an interesting kid that shows off some athleticism.
Man, he can spin it. How big is he, Josh?
Mm-hmm. I would say probably about 6'1", maybe 165, 170. He's not 170 maybe light. He may be a little bigger than that, but he's got some size to him. He's not a little guy or wildly undersized or anything like that. But he's not 6'4", 200 pounds either.
Per his huddle, where we got the video from, 6'1", 178 is what he's listed at. Maybe a little bit heavier than you would imagine.
And he's only, probably 16?
Yeah, probably.
So, he could grow a couple more inches maybe.
Might not have had a nice enough car for the parking garage there at Houston Episcopal, Josh, that we have encountered before.
Garage you'll ever park in.
It is, truly. Micah Rhodes, Klein Oak running back, obviously a name that is familiar to Oklahoma fans, came up and camped last summer. You did catch up with him afterwards. I get it. The video portion of the running back, everything gets so, I don't know, just kind of crazy, pure chaos at Under Armour camps. But you did talk to Micah Rhodes. What's the latest with Oklahoma and DeMarco Murray and their pursuit?
Yeah, yet another thing where running backs and linebackers at camp just get the shaft. They the way that it's staggered by Under Armour, and I understand why they do what they do, but by the time you're done with your O-line and D-line interviews, running back and linebackers are almost over. So didn't get to watch Micah as much as I wanted to, but did get a chance to talk with him for a while afterwards, and he continues to be really high on Oklahoma. Another guy that had kind of a top group. We'll talk about it, in some of the stories that we write, but again, Oklahoma is very much in that group. They have really done a lot to, I think, just he feels very steady about Oklahoma.
Sure.
They are a constant kind of in his recruitment. And he talked about DeMarco Murray kind of feeling like he's a mentor. That's the word he used to describe him and kind of their relationship. And, I can call him and talk to him about anything. It's not just about football. We talk about all kinds of other stuff. So I think there is a very human relationship rather than just coach recruit that is going on with Micah Rhodes and DeMarco Murray.
Josh, let's talk about some of the guys that were here for the Crimson Combine over the weekend. One of the names that stuck out and one of the names that you've made note of on the Crimson Quarter on Sunday, Honoré Johnson. And I turned on the huddle to this kid, and I can see why he's being pursued by just about everybody in the country.
Yeah, another DB out of Southern California that can really play. But yeah, I mean, again, Eddie, talking to him a little bit on Saturday, and we haven't had a chance to sit down for a full interview. You know, they got done with everything, and he actually stayed into Sunday. So there was, as I'm going to camp, he's kind of leaving it. We just haven't quite connected yet. But a guy that really liked Oklahoma, and kind of like what I was talking about earlier with Jordan Clay, where Jordan Clay talked about how meaningful it was to have that offer, on the field. Well, Honor said, I think it was something along the lines of an offer that happens in person just hits different. Like, it feels different. And I'll be perfectly honest. I thought Oklahoma had already offered Honoré Johnson. Like, I thought that had already come and gone. I just missed that. Like, I'll just be fully honest about it and own it. But with Honor, Oklahoma had evaluated him as an offer. They wanted to get him on campus and kind of make it official. Like I said, very similar to the Jordan Clay situation. And based on what he told me in our short conversation, I would expect him to be back. Like, I think he really, really liked Oklahoma, really hit it off with the staff. And his family, there are some interesting connections there with Oklahoma, so we'll kind of have to watch that a little bit. But I like, I think Oregon is the heavy favorite here. That's a lot of people have him pegged to, but I do think Oklahoma will get another shot at him.
What side of the ball do they see him playing? Because we saw a lot of clips on offense and defense there.
Listed as an athlete in the database.
Yeah, that's been my safe. But again, I think it's going to be just DB, kind of probably safety. But I think corner is absolutely also possibly in play. But yeah, and you look at it, like a lot of his pictures, like one with Jay Valai, and you've got Brenton. So you're like, well, okay, I'm not quite sure what to make of all that. But I definitely think it's a defensive focus for him right now. And as he has opened to that, I think more and more schools have gotten interested. Like, I know, for Oregon, it really changed the way they were looking at him as well, because they liked him as a receiver. They love him as a DB. And I think that's kind of where OU comes out as well.
Reese Russell was another name that was in Norman that you had made note of on the Crimson Quarter on Sunday, the Valor Christian offensive lineman out of Littleton, Colorado. Seems like Oklahoma's trying to build some type of pipeline out of Valor. Obviously, got the Sawchuk brothers on campus. Reagan Beers playing basketball over for Jenny Baranchek. But what can you make of Reese Russell? He's going to be a name that I'm sure is going to gain or continue to gain attention here over the next couple years.
Yeah, a guy that I think really Oklahoma really did well with. He talked about another guy, again, kind of brief conversation on Saturday evening, and he was just talking about how much he just enjoyed, kind of the environment and the being around the players and getting to talk to everybody. Like, I just thought it was a guy that kind of, like a shoe that fit. Like, it was just like, oh yeah, this really suits me and kind of what I'm interested in. And I think he really hit it off with Bill Biedenbow. So, again, guys, I mean, there are worse places you could start a pipeline from than Valor Christian that pretty much turns out D1 guys every year. So I think that's a solid starting point for OU. And I think it says a lot, that even in spite of all the, maybe things haven't gone exactly the way Gavin Sawchuk would have hoped when he committed to Oklahoma and all those things, he stuck with it. He stayed in Norman. He's done all these things. And then, guys from Valor Christian continue to show up at Oklahoma, to continue to have interest. I think that says something for what they have built as kind of a culture and their relationship with their players.
The home of Christian McCaffrey.
Home of Christian McCaffrey. Ed McCaffrey, one of the great under the radar, like crazy parents, it sounds like, of all time. But obviously, I think he did something right. It worked out for all of the McCaffrey kids. Just in terms of Crimson Combine overall, I know that there was a lot of talk going into the weekend. How was this going to work without a spring game, a weekend that used to be a massive weekend in Norman for the recruiting side of things? Were there any big takeaways? Did you talk to anybody about maybe a Jim Nagy and what his presentation was to some of these guys? Where was that at as we exit this first spring whatever Crimson Combine weekend?
The only thing that a guy just mentioned, and again, I didn't have a chance to have a direct conversation with a couple of these guys, but was absolutely the ring. The ring came up that he's rocking the Super Bowl ring. So that stood out to guys. And again, I get the impression that that's not really Nagy's style.
Sure.
But That's stuff kids notice. Like that's the kind of stuff like, well, that's what I want to do. Because a lot of these guys come to OU and they even on a visit and they don't realize like they might know the name Jim Nagy, but they don't know. Most of them, if they associate him with anything, oh, that's the Senior Bowl guy. Like I've watched him on TV talk about all the Senior Bowl guys. They don't realize that he's got literally dozens of years in the NFL and has a lot of experience and has worked with some great franchises. So I think that is one of the things that really kind of resounded with people. But again, I think Oklahoma played this smart. I talked about it in the Scoop on Friday. They didn't try to oversell what this was going to be because I don't think they knew what it was going to be. I think that was such a work in progress all spring that they didn't try to say, we're still going to bring in 50 recruits and they're going to come. And I think they knew that the fan response might be, tepid like it was. So they didn't want to make this like, oh, this is our huge, big weekend and then kind of have it come out flat. So I thought they did a good job with that. And they really made it more about like spending time with the coaches, being around their families, those kind of things. And I think that with a lot of these kids really resonated.
In the wake of everything that we talked about on Friday with Nico Iamaleava out of Tennessee and Knoxville, and then everything that dropped on Saturday, we hit it on a little bit during the instant reaction or the practice report after the Crimson Combine on Saturday. What was the vibe around Houston, I'm wondering, Josh, just in terms of, I'm sure there was a lot of talk about Nico and how that's going to affect not just high school recruiting, but will it affect high school recruiting, but just NIL overall? It just seems like that's kind of a big vibe right now around the recruiting side of things.
Well, we'll start with, the media guys I'm talking to from all the various networks and that kind of stuff. Again, want to give a little love to Pete Nakos because there was a lot of like, man, he could have backed down,
vitriol.
He could have, and he stood by it, and he obviously came out ahead on that story and the way that everything was handled in that situation. But as far as Nico itself, I think, guys, the sentiment was very similar to what we've talked about. Like, good for Tennessee. Yeah. They made the right choice. It sucks. It's terrible that they got put in that position. And, now you're hearing all this stuff that, like, stuff was going on before the Alabama game, before the playoff game. Like, this has been an ongoing
nightmare
saga. And I think somebody brought up a really good point of why, and I'd give them credit if I could remember who said it, but it was kind of a why would you even cater, even if you could afford to pay Nico what he wants now, why would you do that? And then the season opener comes around. He's like, well, actually, the number's 5 now. Yeah. Like, at some point, the wheels got to stop turning, and we've got to be able to count on you're our quarterback. You're going to be our guy. And, guys, I mean, talk about badly overplaying your hand because everybody knows. It's all out there in the public now. So wherever Nico goes, there's going to be a locker room conversation. I mean, there's a lot of stuff there, and somebody's going to take a chance. I don't want to say they won't. But he's a bigger gamble than he would have looked like 6 months ago.
And I think it's too, I credit Tennessee for doing what they did. I also think on the flip side, there were some Tennessee fans maybe caught off guard or other people caught off guard. I think the old saying of you recruit your own problems is very true. And Jim Nagy kind of hinted at that at the Crimson Combine.
He had some very interesting conversations.
Yeah, he said
during the Crimson Combine, if you didn't watch the Saturday thing, of him basically, he was talking they were broadcasting it on TV and on radio, but it was also being played to the entire facility.
And he said, he goes, look, there's red flags with certain recruits. And you think back to, I don't know Nico the kid, but clearly his dad and his handler and the way that this thing was handled, you look at it and you go, who's really, having the say for the kid here? And, I think it's also, you look back at Nico's recruitment and it was a big storyline then of how much money he got from Tennessee. And, I think that's something that we're going to have to see play out. Is I think Oklahoma's done a pretty good job under Brent Venables of, hey, we're going to pay you. And sometimes we might pay a lot of money to get you. But, we're not going to just pay whatever you demand, right? Sure. Like, that's not going to be the number one thing in recruitment. Not to say Tennessee does a lot of that. And there's, certain cases, Nico was the number one quarterback in the country. I get it. But you do look back and you're like, oh, there's a red flag there in terms of what was going to end up happening.
Josh, it will be interesting just to kind of tie this back into Oklahoma and the transfer portal that opens on Wednesday on the 16th. Wide receiver is obviously going to be a position that Oklahoma is going to attack rather aggressively. Just kind of overall, what would your feelings be if Oklahoma went back to a Keon Brown? And I think that's a name that's continuing to pick up a little bit of momentum. Previously signed with Oklahoma, ended up at Iowa Western, played in a national championship this year at the JUCO level. Just to kind of rehash and maybe refresh people's memories, Keon Brown coming out of high school, what was he?
A monster. Like I thought he was a guy. I kind of had him in a similar vein to Zion Kearney, like big-bodied, super athletic, probably, if I'm being honest, probably even a better athlete than Zion, like more explosive, not as refined as Zion was at the same point. Hadn't had all the trainers and all that stuff, and was just like a guy that kind of got by on raw ability. But Eddie, I mean, you remember he was a guy that was that first, when he got offered, it was Brent Venables' first summer camp in that 2022. And you saw him and this other, whose name I'm going to forget, two guys from Florida, and you were like, who are these guys?
Yeah.
And Keon came out and he just running past people that had, multiple guys that had big time offers and that kind of stuff. And you're like, okay, this guy's a little different. So I do. And I think Oklahoma, because to me, guys, you can go out at any point in the portal and you can find a guy who could be your number 6 receiver. Like you can find that guy anytime, any place. That's fine. Keon Brown's a guy that, like, this guy could make a difference if everything goes right. Now, he may not. It may not work out. But there is an upside there that not everybody has. I think when you're in this era, when you can just shuffle in and out players, what is the point of going after, like, why do you want to hit the single? Go for the double. Go for the, try to really find something, because just as the players, the players aren't bound to you and they can move around, you're not bound to the players. Like, you can reshuffle it at the end of the season if it doesn't work the way you hoped it would.
The one thing, too, I'll just add on to that as we wrap up the show here is I don't think Keon would cost a lot of money for Oklahoma. And from what I gather, the numbers for some of the wide receivers being thrown out, the guys that, honestly are probably not worth the money that's being thrown around, is pretty insane.
I'm sure.
So I think Oklahoma, not that Oklahoma's just looking for a bargain.
Sure.
But they certainly don't want to overpay. And I think that Keon and his relationship with Oklahoma already being established, coming from a JUCO, it just would make a lot of sense. And I know OU wants to add probably a couple guys. So if you could get somebody like him who would be a bargain and maybe has a lot of high upside and he wouldn't cost a ton of money, and then you go out and maybe you spend a little extra on somebody else that's maybe a little bit more proven, that might be the best route for Oklahoma.
We will get into all of that on Wednesday when the transfer portal opens. We're going to start looking at names, definitely start talking about positions. I know that we've talked about it before, but really kind of centering in on some names and some ideas of maybe what Oklahoma and Jim Nagy are going to do here when the spring portal opens on Wednesday. On Tuesday here on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube channel, a little bit more cleanup from over the weekend and talking to Nate Dreiling and really highlighting on some of the defensive players, because we spent a lot of time on the offensive side on Saturday of who really impressed and who's looking to make a bigger name for themselves in Brent Venables' defense come this next season in 2025, which we will be there not too long, with spring now closed for the rest of, I guess, the year. What? Okay. That's going to do it. Eddie Radosevich, Josh McCuistion, thank you for the services, as well as George Stoya. We'll see you back here on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube channel.